and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee-Jiun in Seoul. Before we get started, let's first get a quick check of today's highlights. Summer vacation season is here, and we tell you what this year's travel trends are looking like and offer some fun vacation options you can enjoy right here in the city. Korea agrees with Mongolia to pursue a bilateral economic partnership agreement, or EPA, to expand cooperation and growth. And we take a look at what benefits the potential Korea-Mongolia EPA would bring to the Korean economy. But first, Korea's producer prices edged up slightly in June. The Bank of Korea says the prices rose an estimated 0.2% last month from May, rising for the third straight month. The central bank attributed the rise to a pickup in steel products as well as global crude prices. Prices of industrial products like steel products increased 0.5%. The price of Dubai crude, Korea's benchmark, spiked over 10% in June compared to March. Compared to a year earlier, producer prices dropped 2.7% last month. Korea's top central banker has warned against the negative impact a loose monetary policy could have on the nation's financial stability. Speaking at a conference in Seoul on Tuesday, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said, while monetary easing may be needed to support growth, the country must pay close attention so that it doesn't destabilize the economy. He noted that small open economies such as Korea are more vulnerable to external shocks as they face the risk of massive foreign capital outflow and a rapid currency depreciation if the key interest rate is too low. The rate currently sits at a record low of 1.25%. He added that there needs to be more effort to limit the fallout external factors can have on the local economy and stressed that it's important to carry out structural reforms and increase international cooperation to secure a strong financial network. With the peak vacation season now well underway, thousands of Koreans are heading out of the country. But for those who aren't, there are plenty of options for an exciting summer right here at home. Our Eunice Kim tells us more.
Welcome to the peak summer vacation season. Kicking off this past Saturday, it runs through the 16th of next month, and already a flurry of travelers are making their way out. At Incheon International Airport, lines weave around the vast premises. The airport expects to see an increase of 26.5% in travelers compared to last year's hit from the MERS outbreak. For those heading out of the country later this month, listen up. The busiest day of the season is set to be July 31st. The Incheon International Airport Corporation is preparing to host the largest number of daily users to date at 191,000. And once again, the government will be enticing Koreans to bypass the airport hustle and bustle and instead spend their holidays at home to help revive the domestic economy. Despite the 10% growth in foreign visitors in the first 5 months of the year, the foot traffic out has surpassed that at 14%. And the Bank of Korea puts the resulting tourism deficit at nearly $1.5 billion. Korea Tourism Organization has featured 33 islands, 20 clean beaches, and 100 spots worth traveling to on their website, as small businesses, especially outside of Seoul, could use the business in earnest.
People are eating out less as companies tighten their belts. We'll have to extend our best service, won't we?
Meanwhile, the Seoul city government is holding nothing back as it kicks off its Hangang Summer Festival. Everything from flyboarding, food tasting among 100 food trucks in Yeouido, and film screenings under the Hangang River bridges are on offer. Just a few of the some 80 programs the capital city has planned in entertainment and the arts to make the iconic Seoul waterway the site of a great summer party in the metropolis. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
A major overhaul in Korea's pet industry is expected after the government designated it as a promising field of growth. The government has introduced a comprehensive set of measures, but some animal activist groups are protesting certain changes. Our Lee Ju-young tells us more.
There have been growing calls from animal activists and the public to crack down on animal abuse and neglect in Korea after a recent documentary exposed the country's puppy mills showing dogs living in unbearable conditions. In a bid to respond to these calls for change and go one step further, the government has designated the pet sector as an emerging industry with promising growth potential. It projects the sector will grow as big as $5.2 billion in 2020, along with the rising number of single and two-person households in the country.
We will create an industrial infrastructure including animal hospitals, pet products, animal insurance, and measures to protect pets and their owners by reforming systems related to pet births, distribution, pet care, and their deaths.
The plan includes changing the current registration system in the pet breeding industry to a license system, relaxing regulations for opening veterinary offices, and installing more pet funeral facilities. The government also aims to develop more pet insurance policies as well as acknowledge veterinary nurses as a professional occupation. Fines for abandoning pets will also be raised from the current $880 to $2,600.
I'm relieved to hear about the new regulations. I think there should be stronger penalties for people who adopt dogs but dump them later without taking any responsibility.
The government said it will also legalize the online sales of companion animals as well as auction houses to promote the industry's growth. But this measure in particular has evoked much anger from animal rights activist groups like CARE, or Coexistence of Animal Rights on Earth. The group told a local newspaper that the animals will become like any other products bought online, raising concerns that people will simply purchase their pets with no interaction whatsoever in the process. CARE adds this will exacerbate the problem of abandoned pets, with numbers already standing at a skyrocketing 80,000 animals a year. The group says rather than add more animals to the market, the government should encourage pet adoption and provide financial assistance to animal shelters and animal rescue organizations instead. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
As President Park Geun-hye continues her economic diplomacy with countries around the world, this time we see fresh results from Mongolia. Korea and Mongolia recently agreed to boost bilateral economic cooperation and exchanges by pursuing an economic partnership agreement, or EPA. And to tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-suk from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. So good to see you, Professor.
Happy to be here.
So Korea and Mongolia agreed to pursue a bilateral EPA, but at this point we're wondering, what's the difference between a free trade agreement and an economic partnership agreement?
Whatever you want it to. There's a lot of names that people use instead of FTAs for political reasons. For example, Korea has a so-called FTA with India, but it's actually CEPA, Closer Economic Relationship Agreement.
Okay.
And we negotiated but stopped negotiating CECA with Mexico, which is in reality an FTA, but they call it a Strategic Economic Complementary Agreement.
Okay.
And most interesting example, Korea is not part of this, but Australia and New Zealand has a Closer Economic Relationship Agreement, CER, and that actually has a closer relationship than an FTA.
Okay.
The reason that people use different titles is that it reduces some of the political burden. FTA stands for Free Trade Agreement, so people worry that we have to open up all our markets. We have to get rid of the tariffs to 0%. But when you have things like Economic Partnership Agreement, it just means economic cooperation, so there's less of a political burden.
All right, then can you give us more background on how this EPA came about with Mongolia and its significance, considering that it hasn't been that long since Mongolia carried out its market reforms, right?
Right. Mongolia actually became a market market-oriented democratic economy only in 1990. Before then, they were a communist country, so they're a transition economy. But Mongolia, Korea has a close, I think, more of cultural relationship because, well, if you go back in prehistory, then Korea used to be part of Mongolian people.
Right.
So there's a lot of relationship there. A lot of people feel very comfortable with Mongolia, but we've sort of been separated from Mongolia because, well, Mongolia is a landlocked country. So there's no easy way for Korea to reach, especially before they became democratic country.
Okay.
And also you have the North Korea standing right between the two countries. So we haven't been able to get a lot of relationship with Mongolia and other Central Korean countries. President Park Geun-hye has been making one of her tasks to try to get closer with these Central Asian countries.
And another thing to note about Mongolia is that it's a very resource-rich nation, but still its economy is very, very small. So when it comes to its economic structure and industrial sectors, what stands out?
Okay, well, what stands out first of all is that it's very dependent on mining. About 25% of their GDP is dependent on mining.
Wow.
So they're very sensitive to changes in global commodity prices. They haven't been doing as well as they did in the last few years, for the last couple of years, because the commodity prices around the world has been dropping. But before then, they had a very high economic growth. Right when they started to become a market economy, their GDP per capita was only about $1,600 per person, but now it reached $4,000 per person. So they've almost tripled their GDP per capita in about 30 years. So that's quite an achievement.
Yes.
But still, their dependence on mining does make it very difficult for them to develop in cases where there's a global recession and drop in commodity prices.
Now, Mongolia is also pushing for a so-called third neighbor policy to, I guess, pursue cooperation diversification with Korea, Japan, as well as the U.S. to lessen, I guess, economic or dependence on the U.S. or China and Russia. So how big is the trade volume between Korea and Mongolia? And also, what areas have the two countries seen most exchanges in?
Okay, well, Korea and Mongolia sadly are not major trade partners. Mongolia ranks 90 last year in terms of the rank in exports, 106 in terms of imports for Korea. They take about 0.04% of Korean exports and 0.01% of Korean imports. Having said that, well, what do we trade? Well, the items that Korea exports to Mongolia are automobiles, oil-based lubricants, cigarettes, and cosmetics.
Okay.
And the items that Korea imports from copper are mostly, imports from Mongolia are mostly copper, raw materials, raw minerals, and metals. So it's very resource-oriented imports.
So what kind of economic benefits can Korea seek by pursuing this EPA with Mongolia? And also, are there any difficulties that Korea might face in negotiating the terms of this EPA?
Okay, well, it's a very small country. The population is only about 3 million people. The GDP is only about 12.5 billion US dollars. So we cannot really count on the EPA agreement to give a major push to Korea. But we've sort of signed FTAs already with major economic partners. So now when Korea signs an FTA, it has a political meaning as well as an economic meaning. Now, having said that, the problem with Mongolia is that it's landlocked and it's very difficult for Korea to reach. But on the other hand, they do have a lot of demand for infrastructure, for construction services. So for certain Korean companies, especially in construction, in IT, in medical services, Mongolia could be a very attractive export target. But because of that landlocked future, because it's very difficult for Koreans to get to, it has been an underdeveloped market for Korea. So they've been depending, Mongolia has been depending mostly on China and Russia, which are their close neighbors. If Korea can break into their market, then there's a good chance that it can do well. But first, in order to do that, we have to break in.
Now, but let's look at the big picture. How would increased cooperation with Mongolia help to boost the Korean or the economy economy as a whole?
Okay, well, as I mentioned before, because it's a small economy, we cannot expect a major export push. But for construction companies, it can be a very attractive target.
Okay.
If you look at Mongolia, about half their population lives in the capital city. So they're overcrowded there. They need a lot of things like subways. They need more infrastructure like power supplies and so on. So that's an opportunity right there. But then if you go to areas other than the capital city, it's very dispersed. And you have still some wandering population. So it hasn't been connected to road networks or electricity networks. So there's a lot of leeway there as well, building roads, building electronic lines to reach the rest of the population.
Now, looking ahead, what more could be done in order for Korea to see actual economic results from boosted relations with Mongolia?
Okay, well, first thing you have to do is figure out how to get people to get in more touch with each other. As I mentioned, the geographical features of Mongolia makes it very difficult. Virtually the only way that Koreans can get to Mongolia is by plane, and they sometimes have to take a very roundabout route.
No direct flights.
Right. So, President Park has been very interested in building a Trans-Siberian Expressway. There's still a problem of what to do with North Korea, but a project like that would be very attractive to Mongolia because, they need to have a lot of leeways to go into other countries because they all have to do it by land route.
Right.
So there's a very good opportunity there, but in order to take care of those opportunities, to take advantage of those opportunities, more Koreans are going to have to meet with more Mongolians and have more discussions, which is why it makes this presidential visit as well as signing of some of the MOUs so important.
All right, we'll definitely look forward to where this boosted bilateral relations will take from here on out. Thank you so much for coming in today, Professor.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. Until then, goodbye.